Hi, everybody, and welcome to another How to Be an Artist Creator profile. I'm your host today, Carrie Brummer, and today I have someone special with me that I'm going to introduce to you right now. The last thing that I know many of you want to think about when following your dreams is talking about money stuff, accounting, taxes, any of it. I know that especially artists can have kind of this starving artist mindset and have some real negativity around money. And that's why today I'm really happy to introduce to you Meg Wheeler, who is definitely kind of the knowledge person that you can the person to go to talk about money and starting a business if that's something you're thinking about. I know that some of you in this community are here for art as a place of play, but I know that there are quite a few of you in this community as well who want or are curious about starting a business with your art. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much, Meg, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you've come to do the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is actually in finance and tax. I'm a former CPA. I let my license expire when I thought I wasn't going to do tax anymore. I actually quit my job a couple of years ago. I was working in the finance world, but I found out my role was changing and wanted to do something that had a little bit more impact. I wanted to build something that mattered. And so I quit. And I actually started my first business called One for Women, which is actually a women's platform, marketplace, and gift company. But I realized I missed the tax world, which I'm sure seems horrible to everyone watching. But I did. I joke with my husband. I actually had a moment when I left my job and I was like, I'll never do tax again. And I was ugly crying. And he was like, I don't get this. But I really loved it. And so, as I was meeting more and more amazing creative entrepreneurs, service-based entrepreneurs, I realized that there was value that I could bring and really help others, just build businesses that were financially fit, help them not be stressed about the money stuff in their businesses. And I was able to do that with my experience and my skill set. And that started to feel like the impact that I was looking for. So that's how I ended up where I'm at. And so now I'm a business money coach and I'm also an on-demand CFO for small business owners.
That's great. I think it's a really good lesson in your journey that we all do actually have unique interests and skill sets.
Yes.
And we should really listen when that inner calling kind of leads us somewhere, because it might seem crazy to someone else, but that means that is your jam, and that's part of, that's part of how you figure it out is when you realize you have this joy around something that other people are like kind of scratching their heads about and so valuable to be able to celebrate and own that. How did you come to realize that you really wanted to work with creatives? Was there a moment or, I'd love to know how that kind of came to be.
Yeah. So I've always been, a type A, very analytical type person, but I grew up in a very creative household. My father is a musician, has been in theater. My mother did theater as well, and also did some drawing and painting. And so I think I was always surrounded by that. And actually, when I was in corporate, I took a side hustle, not so much for the money, but just to express my creativity. And I actually taught flower arranging classes, which for me was interesting because I didn't know how to do it. But true like accountant fashion, I learned how to break it down into a formula and, started teaching that. And so for me, when I quit my job and started to really build this platform for women, I met a lot of creatives because I think, those types of women are just naturally looking for community and looking to kind of share their gifts. And, in conversations with them, I really started to realize I can help you not freak out about this stuff and not be stressed about this so that you can create the amazing things you create, which is, a skill I don't have, but I'm so in awe of. And I really felt like that was a group that I could, and not just women, men as well, but a group that I could certainly, kind of pass on what I had learned and really have an impact with. So
that's so great. Well, then let's talk about this. Let's kind of get into some concrete tips for people. So say that I am completely new to the idea of an art business, but I've been making art. I have some art. I've had some people kind of asking me about selling and buying my art. Kind of what should be some of the first steps I consider if I'm thinking about making this a business?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this because first of all, if someone is asking this question at the beginning, I think that's a really good time to ask it. And it's not to say, if you're a few years in and you're just starting to think about it, that's okay too. Like it's never too late, but I love getting this at the beginning. I think the first thing is really to think about your kind of your revenue model and your pricing. And I hate to say like business plan, because I think that really overwhelms people. And I'm not suggesting you go write like 100-page document on this, which is what some people think of. But really just kind of start to sit down and say like, what do I enjoy doing? What am I good at creating? And what does that look like in terms of a product? So, if you paint but it takes you 3 months to do one painting, that's important information because you can't build a business that requires you to put a painting out every week if that's just not what you do. So you need to understand what it is that you're good at and then figure out, okay, how do I make money from that? And that comes into play with something I see creatives struggle with a lot, which is pricing. And I work with a lot of creatives to actually figure out, how, not only to figure out what they should charge, but frankly, to get their mindset wrapped around charging what they're worth. And yes. I know, especially with creatives, that's like, oh, you do it because you love to create it, and you want to put it out in the world. But the way I look at it is, you're giving this amazing gift to other people. And that's value that you have created in your education, in your experiences, figuring out who you are, and then actually putting the work in and making whatever it is you're making. And so you should absolutely get paid for that because that is so valuable. So I think that's kind of the first one, is really figuring out, what your revenue stream looks like. I know that's like a really scary, like financial word that's not creative at all, but what that revenue stream looks like and, where you need to price things to be in a good spot. I think the second one I would say, and this is the part that I think a lot of people get squeamish about, but is set up a bank account, set up an accounting system. And I would do that from day one. I know that seems crazy, but you can typically get a bank account now for free. If you need a recommendation, I have many. You can typically get an accounting system for free, believe it or not. So my bank account I recommend is Azlo, AZLO, and the accounting system I recommend is Wave Apps. Both are free. And, I think especially as artists, for a lot of you, I imagine you might kind of just start by dabbling. It's kind of like a side hustle, like, oh, maybe I can turn this into something, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But you should still treat it like a business from day one, because if you don't, other people are not going to see it as a business. Mm-hmm. And so the more legitimate you treat yourself, the more legitimate people will treat you, and the more they'll pay you for that. So getting that bank account set up, getting that accounting system set up, it won't take a lot of your time. It'll make you be legitimate. And it'll also really help when it comes to tax time. I know no one wants to talk about taxes, but
it's an important part of running a business.
It is. And I think it'll make it a lot easier. The biggest mistake I see people make is they don't put that stuff into place. And then comes tax time, they're stressing, they're trying to figure it all out. And when I ask them, I say, why didn't you do that? Well, it was a side hustle. I wasn't sure if I'd make money. Do them from day one if you can, or from now if you're not on day one. It really does make a difference. And the last thing I would say is don't ignore your numbers. I am a huge fan of having what I call money check-ins. So I do this monthly. I recommend for people who are new to this to do this biweekly, but you put a half hour or an hour in your calendar. You do not change it. You do not reschedule it. And you sit down with yourself, or if you have a business partner or whatever that is, and you look at your numbers. So you look at your revenues, look at your expenses, and therefore your net profit. Look at your profit margin. It's important to understand not only where your sales are coming from, but if you sell, I'm going to use painting. I don't know why. There are other things, but if you sell a painting for $1,000, but it costs you, $800 in your time to make, but then over here you sell prints, for $100, but they only cost you $10 to make, that's a more profitable venture over here. So you've got to kind of figure that stuff out and just really go through those numbers and know your numbers. That's how you're going to make better business decisions. So
I think that's really good advice. I like the idea too. Like it sets you up to test things too. I find a lot of people in this community, when they do something and it doesn't work out, that then defines them rather than it being, okay, this didn't work, so what else can? Right. And so if we're looking at numbers, it's a way to help us separate and not feel like it's an evaluation of us and our worth or our ability as a creative. It's an experiment to say, okay, I'm noticing my prints are selling more and I do earn more money from them. So maybe I should double down on this. Maybe I should offer more prints or do some limited edition prints that I can even offer at a different price point. And so I really hope that everyone watching this lets that sink in for them, that when we start out, and even when you are a thriving, profitable artist, there are always new things you can test, and those numbers will help you figure out whether it's working for you or not.
And I also think too, sometimes things that are working don't work anymore, and vice versa. So, I mean, I've worked with business owners who are, 5-6 figure range every month, and they've been doing things forever. But when we look at it, we realize, well, actually that is starting to slip, or maybe they're making more sales in a particular area, but it's costing them more. Maybe they're doing Facebook ads. So now all of a sudden that cost per person is going up and up and up. And so it's not as profitable as it was. And if they weren't looking at their numbers, they would never know that. Yeah. So things do change too.
I also really like how you said kind of simply just open up a separate bank account, because it is a way to help you also check in on your money and check numbers. And it's kind of naturally there to check in on your bank account and get your statement every month. And you can see, and if it's only for the purchase of supplies to make your art and this, the profits and sales that you earn, well, then it's so much more clear come tax time or any time that you need to assess what's going on. I found that to be quite helpful for myself. And I have done that. And it's just so easy for me to pop into that account separately and know kind of what's working and what isn't.
Yeah. And not to go all tax on everybody, but if you're in the US, there are limitations on if you have losses from a business. The IRS, after a certain period of time, usually about 3 years, will come in or can come in and actually claim it's a hobby. And I think a lot of artists, may run into this, because if you're not doing this full time, you may have ebbs and flows. And so if you are going through a period where you're buying a lot of supplies, but maybe you're not selling as much, you want to make sure to show the IRS, if they ever did audit you, that your business is legitimate. Now, a bank account is not going to save you on its own, but it's one more thing that shows I'm treating this like a real business. Like I am really trying to have this be a business. This isn't just a hobby or a side hustle. So.
And the point you made as well, that it helps you internalize and own that you're making it a business, is so valuable as well, because just all these little steps we take shift our own mindset, so we can take ownership and feel proud and call ourselves a business owner rather than kind of feeling like we're in this in between and not really sure what we're doing, which can lead to less purchases or an investment in your art, because people can read that insecurity or lack of clarity that you have, and that can actually push them away from deciding to collect your work.
Yeah. And, I'm telling you, perception really is a lot of it. And so I'll give you actually a great example. I was talking to a couple of coaches a few weeks ago, and one had emailed me, and her email was just like an @gmail.com. She has a website, but it's @gmail.com. And when I paid her, she had me Venmo her, which actually, by the way, is not super on the up and up, because Venmo has rules about that. But let's put that aside. And then there was another one I was working with, hers came from, her email address was at her domain name, and she sent me an invoice. I forget her system, but through whatever her accounting system was, and it was all very professional. And I walked away from that, and I was like, I know which one I'm going to work with in the future, because to me right there, when I looked at the one with the Gmail address and the Venmo for payment, I thought, she's not in this. Like, she hasn't even invested the $5 a month to have a branded email address and, to have an accounting system to invoice people. Like, that tells me that she hasn't fully committed to this as a business.
Yes.
And I don't want to work with someone or develop a relationship with someone who doesn't respect their own business. So
yes,
perception
Amen.
matters.
Yeah, totally hear you. Yeah, and we can think about that with our art. It is easy to sign up with a Google Work account so that you have your own domain name.
Yes.
It's pretty easy now to set up a website, even though I know I just had conversation with people inside my mastermind program. We just had a Q&A, and I know that they're kind of dragging their feet on setting it up or publishing it, and that's a whole separate story. But still, like, there are a lot of tools available to us to get these things up and going that help set a tone of professional, which is a way to build trust and rapport with your potential collectors.
And I'm telling you, free bank account, free accounting system. There's no excuse.
Yeah, no, great advice. I've scheduled myself now because I tend to like to avoid that stuff. And I map it in my calendar and I make it the first thing of the week because I hate doing it so that it's done. Nice. And I just give myself a half an hour a week. And then, once a month, really make sure that all of my inputting of kind of receipts and things like that are all set up. And come tax time this year, it was so much easier than previous years because I finally was like, okay, time to get a system in place.
I posted on my Instagram a few weeks back. So I have two businesses, and the women's platform is also a products-based business. So it's actually fairly complex. It took me 15 minutes to do my taxes for my business total. Awesome. So that's the benefit of having a nice setup. Yep,
it is. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we might have covered it already, but I'd love to ask you, what is advice that you wish more creative entrepreneurs would take or listen to when they start their business?
We touched on this so much, but I'll say it again and in a different way too. Excuse me, allergies are killing me right now. Don't ignore the money stuff. I get it. Well, I sort of get it because I love talking about numbers. Right. But no, I get it from everyone I work with and I talk to. Like, I see the agony and the anguish of talking about this stuff. But the thing I like to think about, or the way I like to look at this, is the numbers are one of the only things in my business that are consistent and always going to give me the same answer. 1 + 1 is always going to equal 2. If I make $100 and spend $50, I'm always going to have $50 left. It's so unusual to have anything else predictable in, running a business. And so if you start to see your numbers as a guide to help you make better decisions, then I think they become a lot less scary. For me, numbers are just data. And I know that that's really tough to feel when, your revenues are smaller than your expenses. But it is just data. And I think you pointed it out before, if you look and your prints are doing really well, that's data. That's, saying, hey, there's demand there. Why am I focusing on this over here? So don't ignore it. It's, anyone who's ever struggled with money knows this, that, the longer you wait to check your bank account, the worse it gets. Yeah. The sooner you jump into it, the sooner you deal with it and get this stuff set up, the less painful it's actually going to be.
Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Something I know people in here can connect it to and relate with is a lot of artists like to also avoid critique experience. They hear the word critique and think it means that you're only looking for the things going wrong with the artwork instead of it being actually data points. It's information that you can use to then inform the future decisions you make in your artwork. And perhaps that's a way for people to think about these numbers is go, okay, these again are not a critique. It's not showing you these are all the things you're doing wrong. It could be these are things that are going well, and these are things I need to double down on. And so a lot of it is about how we frame it and whether we're actively looking for information or not. Sometimes we don't want to know information and we're avoiding it. And that's a whole other issue that we need to own and reflect on as a creative, because that can actually stymie our success because we're avoiding things that scare us, and that's going to keep us small.
Absolutely. And, I mentioned this a little at the beginning, but I see this with a lot of creatives, this not just fear, but almost guilt of making money. And, and everybody has different backgrounds and comes from different experiences. But for whatever reason, this is especially prominent, I've noticed, in creatives. And I think we have to start, I mean, you said it too, but we have to stop tying our worth to the money in our business. It's the money I make has nothing to do with my value, but I am worth my value. And so I need to be paid for what I'm creating because my time is money. And, if I'm not getting paid to create something for someone, then I could be spending my time with my family. I could be spending it on self-care. And so we need to start valuing our time for what it is worth and not feeling so guilty about asking other people to pay us when we share our gifts. So we've got to change that.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have a few minutes left, and I kind of want to shift gears here. I'll make sure you guys have the link to Meg's website. But when I was taking a look through it, I already felt like I knew Meg before we came on video today in some ways because her voice was so clear in her branding. And while branding isn't something we necessarily talk about as creatives, because especially as artists, our art is our brand. So it kind of is set up for us in a nice way. I think it's really helpful to hear about how, Meg, how have you helped your voice show through in your website? Because that is something we can be thinking about in our art, but also how we present ourselves when we're selling and promoting our work.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I don't know that I've ever strategically thought about my branding. That's a bad thing to say, but I don't think I have. But it is, I do feel like my branding very much reflects me. And I think for me, I've always been a very outgoing person. I've always been very comfortable speaking, very comfortable expressing myself. And so when I sat down to really craft my website or my Instagram or even my social media content every week, I just talk it out. I sit there and I say, okay, what do I want to say? And it's funny. I'm actually, I do a lot of writing as well. So I definitely have that side of me that goes back and proofreads and rewrites and formalizes things. But I actually try not to do that when I am developing content for my audience because I want it to feel like I'm talking to you, like we're just hanging out right now, or we're grabbing a beer, in the backyard or whatever it is. And for me, that was one of the, I came out of a very stiff finance environment, a lot of, not downing on the men, but a lot of men, a lot of suits, it was very stiff. And once I entered this entrepreneurial world, I didn't see many people talking about money in a different way. And for me, I felt like I could talk about these things in a very approachable, very down to earth manner. And so I want that to come across in my branding. I want you to feel comfortable as much as you can talking about money, talking about the numbers, and feel like it's something you can understand, like this is not, creatives can absolutely, you guys are so incredibly smart. Like you guys can get this stuff. Yeah. And I hate when people say I'm not a numbers person, I'm like, BS, we can get you there. It's just that nobody has ever presented the information in a way that is comfortable. And so that's really what I try to get through in my branding.
Yeah, I think that's great. And something I want all of you watching and listening to think about here is remember then that the way you present your art, the way you talk about your art, social media and website too, that's part of, you're not just thinking about you, but you're thinking about how you want other people to feel when they interact with your work and when they interact with you. And again, when you're confident in all aspects of your business, you're going to show up more naturally in that way so that it makes it easier for people to connect with you.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it, and I was sort of getting there, but I never said it. So you nailed it, which is, yes, I think about, how I want them to feel. I think about what I want to give to them, not about me and, hi, I'm Meg and this is what I do and blah, 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 blah. Like I think about what I want them to experience. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And how you can serve, which is the point, right? We're all here to trying to help each other. And if we're making a business, it's, the money is part of it, right? But it's actually because we have something of value to share with the world.
Yes.
So I always like to end these conversations with talking about defining artist. And I'd love to ask our numbers girl here, what does that word mean to you?
Oh, no pressure, right? The non-artist defines artist to artist. Oh boy. Okay. Hot seat. I think for me, art is really, it's kind of what we were talking about with branding. Art is really creating something that gets people thinking and feeling. I have an economics degree from undergrad, but I also have a philosophy degree. And for me, what always made me so excited about philosophy was it got people thinking. And I just thought that there was so much power in that. And that's what I love about art and artists is that I went to a museum the other day. And there was this, I like cornered my eye, saw this person, and I looked over. It was a fake person. It was not a real person, but they were sitting at like this desk, and I realized there was rope, and I was like, oh, that's an exhibit. And I stood there for like 20 minutes trying to figure this thing out. I was like, at first I was like, this is weird. And then I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm checking out all the things. And I mean, it got me thinking about so many different things. And then I started thinking, I wonder what the artist, why they came up with this. Why did they do this? And that was such a cool experience. Like I wouldn't have that experience, just talking about numbers. It really got me thinking about the world. And I think I've told like 20 people since then about this. So it had an impact on me. And I think that's what art is. That's what art does. And it's very powerful. So.
Yeah, amen. I totally agree.
I pass.
Yeah, you totally pass. Our community is about being inclusive in terms of art. It's very important to me that people who choose to create for the pure joy of creation feel just as important and valued as people who choose to sell. I think a lot of people feel like their art is only worthwhile if they choose to sell it. And that's something we try to dispel. So I love that your definition, even being a numbers person, isn't about the numbers. It is not about selling. It's about the work and the message it shares. So, Meg, thanks so much for being here today. Where can people find you if they'd love to connect with you more?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is megkwheeler.com. And then I'm on Instagram at Meg K Wheeler, also Facebook, Meg K Wheeler. I do a blog post every week. I also do a Facebook Live on money and tax topics every week. So they're short. They're not too painful. So you can find me over there on Facebook for those.
That's great. I'll make sure all these links, once we're done with our live chat here, are below the video for you guys so you have access. And I think I'm going to go sign myself up to those weekly Facebook Lives. So thank you again, Meg, for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time in our next How to Be an Artist Creator Profile.